Well, hello. Oops. Hold on. We're almost ready. Almost ready, but not quite. We'll do the magnet thing today. Let's see how that's going to work. Will that work? That looks pretty good. Let's see. Let's see. Hello, Jasper. Glad to have you. Glad to have you. Good to see you. And who is this Dave Edwards guy from North Kakalaki? Kakalaki. That's a new one on me, Dave. Good to see you. Glad to have you. Hope you're well and hope your family's doing well. Let's see what else we got here. Is that working? Yes, that's working. Yes. That seems to be working. We'll see. This is going to be an interesting little show here, guys. Yeah. Not sure about it, but sometimes that's just the way it goes. Let's see. What is that? That will work. Number 8. The problem is I change things so much from week to week, and I have a full screen monitor right here behind the camera. And on that full screen monitor, I put all sorts of stuff so I can see what's going on. I put myself, I put the time. If I have a speaker, I put the speaker. And if I rearrange the inputs, the full screen is tagged to an input number. So if I have it tagged to input number 6, and then I move another input up to, say, number 2, then 6 becomes 7, but full screen input still thinks it's 6. I sure would like it not to work that way. Yeah. Just north of South Kakalaki and just north of South Kakalaki and south of Old Virginia. Well, heck, I've been through all 3 of those places. I just didn't call them like that. Is it safe for small children? Well, this will be probably informative for the small child in you or me. But the idea is really more than anything else that I wanted to get this out there so that I can refer people to it and say, okay, if you're just learning about audio, this is the way. We're gonna take you back to the very beginning, to cavemen times. Hello, Ron. Good to see you. Glad to have you. Well, Greg, you'll probably learn a couple things from this one. Or you may have some comments. So there we go. That's right. That's right. It's going to be fun. The idea is that the premise that I'm working with today, and you guys are not there, but bear with me and critique me. But is the premise I'm working with today is somebody that's coming into live streaming today. Here's the scenario. I get the phone call. Hi, looking for tech support for vMix. Our audio doesn't work. Okay, great. Tell me more. Well, the person that used to do that here at our church has left and gone somewhere else, and it's not working anymore, and we don't know what to do. Okay. I.e., they're clueless. They're not the sound guy. They're not the audio person at their church. They're just somebody that knows something about computers and is supposed to come in and make this work. Or they volunteered, or they inherited it. You never know. But they don't understand how audio works. So that's the idea today. This is how audio really works. we will see. Maybe it'll work this way and maybe it won't. golly gee, the studio is in a wreck. You would not believe, open boxes and parts and pieces all over. Processes of repairing systems that were sent to me because they broke. I mean, literally, like they dropped their laptop on the concrete and the hinge broke, and they're like, what do we do? Send it to me. I'll see if I can fix it. So I've got my my epoxy that I'm going to try to fix their broken laptop hinge with. It's not the hinge, it's where the hinge attaches. Why would you have a metal hinge that attached to a plastic part and it's going to open and close on the hinge? And you don't think, I mean, who thought that plastic part was going to last? I mean, the plastic part's got some little, or those little screw zerk thingies in them that were embedded into the plastic. But obviously they didn't stand the test of time. So yeah, that's the thing. Oh, here we go. Here's another one. Well, I'm glad I helped you. The nice thing about the help I can offer is I'm an idiot. So I know how idiots think. Now, and this is not intended as an insult to anybody, but just, if you wear the cap, if you've got those scars from the things that didn't work right, then you're an idiot. Yes, you are. Sorry about that. I mean, even Greg. Greg did the, what was the thing he was telling me about? Most recently, you did the audio for the, the last one I remember is for the, what's the big golf tournament in Augusta, Georgia? The Masters. So this was the women's Masters. And he had, what did you have? 100, 150, 200 audio sources that were coming in. Yeah, he had to deal with all that. And then you did, what was it? The US, I don't know. You did something. The ANWA. Well, that's helpful. That's helpful. Yeah, that's it for Greg. Greg's like, here, I'm going to help you, but I'm not going to help you. You're on your own. All right, what did I do with that other thing? Hold on a second here. Guest speaker view. That could be it. Let's see what that looks like. No, that's not it. We'll minimize that again. Lower third, call, virtual, clocks, virtual. Oh, let's see. Pre-show, post-show. Yeah, that's not it either. Replay, great, never mind. Okay, here we go. Augusta National Women's Amateur. Also the U.S. Open and the Women's U.S. Open. Okay. And so Greg sits with a board. Do you have a board, or is this all electronic? You're just doing it on monitors? Or do you have a good old-fashioned soundboard? Everything's probably... Are you using Dante for all that stuff? How many channels can Dante carry? I mean, when you're using a bunch of channels or individual audio sources. Yeah. All right. So there we go. That's what he's using. And he's not using Dante. He's using everything. He's using Maddie. He's using SMPTE. Yeah. And Dante can do 512 channels per gigabit leg. Okay. I could probably just do with one leg in my studio then. Yeah. If you don't remember Greg is the great guy that did a lot of the camera work for us at NAB back in April when we did the individual giveaways at the individual booths. His arms are probably still aching from that. And when he says, assuming 48K, I know the answer to this one. 48K is not his salary for that event. It is the size of the audio channel. So yeah, so 512 channels at 48K plus some room for overhead, I'm sure. Yeah. Let's see. I don't have any props today. I have pictures. So we'll use pictures instead and just sort of talk about them. And if I can make the pictures work right, I will be super happy. And this can be a video that you can hand down to your children. Or if you're at a church or a school or just getting started with live streaming, or you want to teach somebody how to do it and you don't want to spend time teaching them kind of the basics. Excuse me, I've got an itchy eyeball. Then you can use this video to explain to them in very simple terms for small children and idiots. Yeah, that's what it's going to be. Small children and idiots. We need to do a little ticker across the bottom. Hang on. Have I got a minute? Yeah, I've got a minute. Let's see if we can do this. Graphic titles. Do we have a ticker already added? Side by side. Post pre. Thomas lower third. No, let's add a ticker. It's a title. It's a GT ticker. We'll make it a red one. And we're going to make this ticker say A GUIDE. Oh, all caps. UIDE to AUDIE for small children and idiots. There we go. And let's see if we put that one on there, what happens. There it is. There it is. And it crawls across, and then it stops. All right. So can we speed this up a little bit? Speed. Let's see if it's set on 4 and we set it to 6, what happens? It goes faster. Okay, good. There we go. And if we set it, yeah, okay. That'll work. That'll work. That'll work. Rich, you haven't missed a thing. We haven't started. So we're good. Hello, Kyle. Welcome. Glad to have you. Good to see you. Glad to have you. Let's do this thing. Okay. We've got our handy dandy X Keys XBE96 keyboard here. And we're going to push one of the purple buttons to get the show started. So sit tight. This is going to be good. Yeah, baby. All right, we're here. Oh, we're in the wrong spot. Let's try this shot. Whoa. Sorry about that. You know, that's what happens when you make a lot of changes at the last minute and then don't have time to review them or don't take time. Yeah, that's what idiots do. So welcome to the club. If that's you. Hello, Ed. Glad to have you. Yes, it is 1500, so it's time for us to go. Let's do it. We are going to talk today about audio. And if you're just joining us, like Ed, or perhaps Kyle or Rich, I had a call. I get this call all the time. Hey, vMix tech support? Sure, that's who I am today. Yeah, well, we got a problem with our audio. Okay. What's the problem? Well, not really sure. We just, the person that was doing vMix before left, and now I'm doing it, and I'm having a problem with my audio. So, okay, good. Well, let's talk about that. You know, tell me about your audio setup. Well, okay, let's walk through. Click on this, click on that. Let's see what you got, blah, blah, blah. And what I realized in taking this phone call 50 million times, well, not 50 million, but maybe 500,000, that the average person on the street is an audio idiot. No offense intended. It's just the way it ends up. You just, you know, it's not like you grew up in that world. Now, some people did grow up in that world. They may have grown up in a musical family where they were constantly, you know, loading up the band and going places and setting up equipment and that kind of thing. Or they may have grown up in a radio family or a TV family where they had a basic understanding of how audio works. But I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to me. I'm talking about the person that didn't know the difference between an audio input and an audio output. Yeah, that's you. You don't have to admit it to anybody, but I know that's you. And it's okay. We got to start where we are. So the idea with this stuff is, let's see, let's go here for just a second. Let's go here. Yeah, that's where we want to go. And now we're going to go here. This, whoops, we went too far. I threw this together at the last minute. This is an audio output. That is an audio output. That is audio coming out. So if somebody asks you about audio outputs, think about audio coming out. That's audio coming out. Now, for every output, there's almost always an input. Output, input. Output, input. So we got an output here and an input here. Now, if this person decides to speak to that person, they become an input and this person becomes an output. They switch roles. But an audio output always has an input to go with it, especially in the audio world that we're talking about. In communication, yes, I know, I ignore my wife far more than I should, but that doesn't mean that I'm not at least pretending to be an input when she's outputting. The idea is that in the audio world, we have to think about what these things are. Are they inputs or are they outputs? Because that's basically everything is an input and an output. And then what happens to it after that is something else. All right, so we've got an input and we've got an output. And now we have devices. We have a device. You recognize that? That's a microphone. Is that an input or an output? The microphone itself. Is the microphone, Chris just joined us. Chris, is the microphone an input or an output? is the girl an input or an output? Those of you in chat can answer the question. I'm watching it right here. I'm watching it right here. Is the microphone an input or an output? Is that an input device or an output device? I'll help you with that. Is audio going into the microphone or is audio going out of the microphone? Thank you, Chris. Chris says it's an I/P, which I'm assuming is some sort of shorthand, some sort of Kiwi, New Zealand shorthand for input. Yes, the microphone is an input device. Oh, and Greg, remember Greg from the pre-show? And Greg says it's both. Well, let's talk about, this is not something that I can do, but maybe I can point to it. Let's see, let me point to it here and then point to, no, I have to do it like this. That part right there. Right in front of her mouth. It's an input device. The microphone itself, the little fuzzy part, do I have one here? No, I don't have one here. Well, I have one here. But the top part that she's speaking into is an input. Yes, it's both, but it's also, the top part of it is where the audio goes in. Microphone, audio, in. Audio going into the microphone. Now, what happens when it gets in the microphone is something altogether different. It gets processed, and then there's a cord attached to it, unless it's a wireless mic, and that cord plugs into something, and the end of that cord becomes an output. So what does that output have to plug into? Somewhere on some other device, that output, and those of you in the chat can answer your questions. You don't have to raise your hand. The other end of that microphone, if I'm speaking into the microphone, audio is going into the microphone, and it's on a cable or wireless, and it attaches to another device on the other end. The end of that cable is called, say it with me, an output. That's why Greg said it was both. Because the microphone on the front part is where the audio goes in, and the mic and the cable goes around, and the other end of the cable is where the audio comes out. So yes, the microphone is both an input device and an output device. The top part of it, where we talk into it, is input. We're the output, it's the input. The other end of the cable is the output, and that output has to match up with a, come on. Oh, there's the bell. That output has to match up with an input. Let's see if we've got an input here. No, we don't. I think our next slide, let me see what the next slide is, and then we'll see how it fits into all of this. Hello, Jeep and Dave. Ah, yes. There's an output device. So we've got a microphone functioning as an input device, and this is where the output comes. Yep, these are the kind of speakers that Greg uses when he does audio for the golf tournaments. He sets them up behind every tee. Okay, so we've got a microphone that's an input device, a speaker that's an output device, but there's got to be something in between. I mean, yeah, there are certain times when you can plug a microphone straight into a speaker, but that's not what we're talking about, because we're talking about live streaming. So we've got a bunch of other piece parts between our microphone and our speaker. And one of those piece parts is likely to be an audio mixer. Now, sometimes it's called a mixing board. Sometimes it can be incorrectly, or at least this one can be incorrectly called an audio interface. That's a little different. We might talk about that. But you see, this little audio mixer, this audio board, has all sorts of buttons and holes and dials and things on it, which can be pretty intimidating. You think that one's intimidating? What about that one? You think that one's intimidating? What about that one? Holy moly. Let's go back to the first one. You might notice, and I wish I had a pointer where I could point to it. Should have thought this out a little better. In the top left-hand corner of that mixer are two black dots. And those two black dots are actually inputs where you can plug in a microphone. You can plug it in as an XLR, that's the kind with 3 little pins, or you can plug it in as a 1/4 inch, that's what they call the old telephone jack. Chris is saying that they call these things sound desks in New Zealand. How about that? A sound desk. So we have our inputs in the top left-hand corner, and then below them, and we're going to take it like in a row, just like my shirt. Excuse me, a column, just like my shirt. Below the top left one are going to be the knobs that control the audio for that top left input. And there's a pink knob, 2 green knobs, and an orange knob. Now, let's go back to this next picture here. You see our first channel way over here, and each one of these columns is called a channel. Our first channel has a couple of inputs at the top. Let's see if I can get you a larger picture of this. I don't know that this is it might be a little fuzzy. But yeah, okay. So you can see they're numbered across the top, and the top left has that one, and then it has one of those little black circles, looks kind of like a little smiley face. And then below it is a silver circle. Those are both inputs for the XLR on the top or the 1/4 inch jack on the bottom. And then below that in column 1, you've got a green knob, 3 white knobs, a blue knob, a yellow knob, a red knob, and a silver slider, and probably a little white button just to the right of the silver slider. Now, I can't see exactly what all these are, but I do know that each one of these knobs has an impact on the audio for that channel. And every mixer is going to be set up a little bit differently. Again, if we go back to this guy, he doesn't have nearly as many buttons in column 1. He's got 4 buttons in column 2, whereas this guy's got a bunch. And this guy, whew, my goodness, he has got a ton. And this would be kind of a mixing board. Let's go back to this guy for a second. So again, looking at the column for number 1, with the audio coming in at the top, and the top would either be an XLR for a microphone or a 1/4 inch for an instrument, a guitar or a piano or a keyboard, something like that. And each one of those columns, 1 through 12 in this case, would be an individual input. So if we had, let's say we had 3 singers, and they would be places 1, 2, and 3. And then we had a guitar in 4, a keyboard in 5, and maybe, what else would we have? Bass guitar in 6. And then maybe we'd be crazy and we'd mic the drum set in 7. Chances are we might do it in 7, 8, and 9, depending on how many mics were on the drums. And so each one of those could be individually controlled could be for EQ, that is for higher, more volume in the high notes, more volume in the low notes, less volume in the high notes, something that's gonna make the audio sound here in the board, in what we hear from the board, like it sounds in the room. Sometimes I'll tweak my audio here in the studio with a little bit more of a low to give my voice kind of a lower timbre. Other times I forget to do that and I just sound like my regular voice. The other buttons can do things like take the audio from channel 1, and it might be, let's say, probably one of those, that blue knob or the yellow knob, and send it somewhere else. And so if you look at that whole row, let's see if I can point to it here, that whole row of blue knobs, we'll go to them here for a second. That whole row of blue knobs could possibly all be directed to one specific output. And so as we adjust the blue knobs, we can send, whoops, it started back up again, doggone it. There we go. As we adjust the blue knobs, and let's say for example that the main singer wants to hear herself in her ear monitor and doesn't want to hear the drum set, doesn't want to hear wants to hear a little bit of the bass and a little bit of the keyboard, none of the guitar, and none of the singers around her. So we're going to take this channel 1 right here, and we're going to turn that blue knob a little bit so that she can hear herself. And then the keyboard, I think, was number 4. So we're going to turn that blue knob up for number 4. And number 5 was the bass. And we're going to leave all the other ones, each one of these rows, these columns, we're going to leave each one of those down except the ones to go to her ear. And that's called an auxiliary output. And let's say that's auxiliary output number 1, because you can have more than one. And the headphones, I don't have a set of headphones handy right here, but the headphones for her, or the earpiece for her, the ear monitor for her, would be connected to auxiliary output number 1. And auxiliary a lot of times is abbreviated as aux, A-U-X. So it would be aux out 1. She would be aux out 1 in her ear. And let's say the other singers wanted their own in-ear monitors. So aux out 2 might be for him, aux out 3 might be for her, and they would include the different individual channels here that they wanted in their ear. And they would connect, got to get the right hand here, they would connect somewhere up here in the auxiliary output section. This is sort of a mixer, an idiot's mixer guide here too. So a lot of times in live streaming, we want to take an auxiliary output, especially if this board is being used for the in-house sound reinforcement. Sound reinforcement? Yeah, the speakers. You remember the speakers? The speakers that we might have in our church. You've probably got some like that sitting in your church, don't you? I know I do. So that would be these two red knobs right here. Those are going to be the main outputs, and that's what's going to go to those speakers. But we don't necessarily want the audio that's going to those speakers to go to vMix, because we may not want as much drums, for example. We may not want the vocals to be as high, or they may need to be higher. And so we will monitor with some headphones, maybe mix number 4, audio output number 4, that will go to vMix. And that will attach to this board somewhere, wherever it's appropriate. Let's see, we've got another picture here. Let's try that one. Yeah. So here's somebody that is adjusting what I think is aux 2 for that particular channel. And in our case, once it goes out of the soundboard, it may come out what they call analog, which means it's just going to be a little cable. I think I've got an analog cable here. Let's see. Yeah, just a little teeny cable like that. Sometimes called 1/8 inch, sometimes called 3.5 millimeter, but that's what plugs into the back of the PC. And most PCs, not laptops now, but most desktop PCs are going to have a pink, a green, and a blue. Now, you need to know the difference between the pink, the green, and the blue because, hang on a second. The pink, the green, and the blue are going to tell us what's what. The pink is going to be for a microphone, and I'm not going to get into the ins and outs of that. Number one, because I don't understand them, and number two, because I can't explain them. But if you've got a microphone that will plug into an 1/8 inch jack, that's where you plug your mic. That would be like a headset where you had a boom mic or a little headset mic coming in, and you would plug into that, plug the mic part into that. The green part would be for speakers or headphones. So that's going to be an output. And then the blue one is typically called a line in jack, in being the key word, meaning it's an input. So if we're going to take the output from our mixer, we're going to connect that, to the blue jack right here. That's going to be the line in on the PC. Now, there's some PCs that do their audio with USB, and we'll talk about that a little later. That's generally, it's a more complicated way of doing it. It might be better, it might be worse. Joe DeMax doesn't care for it. He doesn't like audio over USB, but he's an audio snob. Just between you and me and everybody else that's watching. It is not uncommon for folks to have something plugged into the wrong jack. And when that happens, obviously it's not going to work. I was working with somebody on the internet, I think in Facebook the other day, and they were having problems with their audio just disappearing. And the first thing I asked, let's start with the simple stuff first. As human beings, a lot of times we like to assume the worst, most complicated problem and try to go solve that first. Let's start with the basics. Is everything connected? Is it connected? Is it connected in the right place? Is the cable working? How many times do we have a bad cable? Everything has an end to its life. And sometimes that end might be 20 years, and sometimes that end might be 6 months. And sometimes that end might be immediate. I had a situation, and it wasn't an audio cable, but it was an Ethernet cable, where I had a bad Ethernet cable. It just went bad. I don't remember what happened to it. Maybe I broke it. Probably that's what happened. So I grabbed a new one off the shelf, opened it out of the bag, plugged it in. It didn't work. And I thought, oh, I've got a problem somewhere else. So I looked around other places for the problem. Finally decided, let's take this new cord and plug it into something that I know is working and verify that it's working. And it didn't work. So I pulled another one out of the bag, plugged it in. It didn't work. Pulled a third one out of the bag, and it worked. So you always want to verify that things are working the way you want them to, the way they're supposed to work, before you assume that there's a problem and that the part that you've replaced is actually good, because that's not always the case. Cables are funny. Cables can wear out, especially the little jacks here. Those can get loose over time. And that's why a lot of people like to use USB, I guess, although USB can get loose over time too. Okay. So once we've got audio going in to vMix, and I know this, let me go to the big shot. I took a picture of this off the screen, and it's not very good. I want to do a screen capture with that, and I guess I should have figured out a way to do that. In vMix, this is a list of all of the audio input options that I have on my PC. Now, some of those don't exist anymore, and some of them never did, but their drivers are on there. Windows sees the driver, and so vMix sees what Windows sees. And it says, okay, here are your audio devices that can possibly send audio to you. That is, they are inputs in vMix. They're outputs on their end, but they're inputs on the vMix end. And the one that I use the most is right in the middle there, called UMC ASIO driver. That's the one for my Behringer UMC 404 HD audio interface. But that's not what I'm using today, but that's a different story. And that's the audio that's coming in to vMix. Now, when audio comes into vMix, and let me just, if I got a good screenshot I can use here. Yeah, let's use this one. All right, so this is my setup today. In this bottom right-hand corner of vMix, right here, that's the audio section. And you can see that the audio bars are jumping up and down there. And I've got all sorts of different audio devices going on. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got 8 audio inputs. I'm only using one. That's the one that you see right down here. And that's the audio output. See that little blue bar right there? That says output. That little blue bar there says inputs. And so it reads from left to right and from top to bottom. In fact, let's just pop this out. Whoops. So that it's easier to see. There we go. And we'll move it back over here. We'll go, oh, yeah, I guess it was easy to see over there. We go full screen with it. And we'll make all of these available to see. And you can see here that I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 audio inputs. And I'm using one right this second. My outputs are going to the master. And I'm not using the A, B, or C channels, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But I'm also recording. That's kind of an output. So this is the summation of what my audio is doing in vMix. And each one of these buttons has a particular purpose. We can get into that later if we have time. So this is my audio mixer in vMix in the same way I have a mixer that I showed a picture of just a few moments ago. Now, number 79 right here, and you can't see the 70 or the 9, but this is, where is the shot right here? There we go. This is my mic right here. Oops. Decided we were going to change positions, did we? Stop right there. Go back there. There we go. And my mic on this list is, looking down the list, is something called microphone, wireless microphone. Yep, that's what it's called. And so I had to figure out when I attached it what it was and how it was new. And that became the input that we saw. Where's our shot again? Right here. That became this input right there. And as you can see by the audio popping up and down, it's working. Now, if I click any one of these buttons here, that's right, I turned it off and didn't send it out to the master, because the master is what gets streamed and recorded in vMix. I've also can turn it off. You couldn't hear me, but you notice, I don't know if you noticed, but look at that little bouncing up and down volume meter right there. It's going to turn blue when I turn it off. Now it's back on and it's green. And I've got lots of other buttons here that we'll talk about another time. Again, a very important button right here is going to be the slider. Slider, volume, slider, volume. There we go. That's about right there. All right. And then the last part that I've got prepared in terms of slides is the vMix outputs. And vMix, just like that mixer I showed you a little while ago, had auxiliary outputs. vMix has auxiliary outputs. It also has a main output. That's called the master. And then it has a special output for folks that are using headphones. And that's where you can connect and tell vMix that to send the audio to the headphones at a particular destination. You notice the master output is speakers. Okay, that's cool. The headphone output is something called out 1-4 Behringer UMC 404 HD 192K, channels 1 and 2. And that is basically this little cable that's attached to the headphone jack on the Behringer. So vMix knows to send the audio to the headphone jack on the Behringer. It also knows that it can send audio over any one of these 2, 4, 6, 7 channels, A through G, to whatever destination I want it sent to. I might want to send it to another headset. You can see B right there is W55 high definition audio device. That's the television set in front of me. Sometimes when I'm having a Skype call or a Zoom call or a vMix call for that matter, I'll use the audio from the TV as a way for me to hear. Or when I play music in vMix, I'll enable the B button. And let's see. Can we go back to that? Yeah, let's go back to that. Where's that shot? Right there. Yeah, there we go. You might notice, I don't know if you can see right there, but that's the B button. And that's on the bumper music that plays in the pre-show, in the pre-show, when we're just kind of got a screen up there and letting you know how much time it is before we start the show. And that's the B channel. So I'm routing the audio from the B channel to the TV set. And it's an output. This is the vMix audio output section. Okay. Let me do, excuse me, goodness gracious, sorry about that. Let me do a quick review on this and make sure we've covered all the bases. We're going to start out with an output. That's the audio coming out. And that audio output is going to connect to an audio input. And together, outputs and inputs give us an audio chain. And when that chain is broken, we have a problem. If I do this, I've shut off the input. Excuse me, the output. If I do this, I've shut off the input. Simple concept, I hope. Here's an output outputting into an input. And that input is also an output on the other end of the cable. These guys are outputs, but in the back of them are little holes where cables plug into that are inputs. And those cables on that end are the output. And they're probably coming, well, they're probably not coming from that guy. They're probably coming from this guy. But they're coming as outputs from this board, or they may be an auxiliary output from this board so that somebody can hear something, or so that in other cases, and Greg can probably speak to this, where you're going to do some special processing with your audio. Maybe you're going to send it through another device that's going to do something with the audio. You would use an auxiliary output to send it out, and then you would have an input that would bring it back in. Sometimes when you do that in vMix, it can get a little tricky, because if you're sending audio out and bringing it back in, that's where we get an echo a lot of times, and we can talk about that too. In our PC, we've got the blue one. Whoops, the finger's right here. The blue one is a line-in jack, which is going to be audio that comes from a mixing board. The green is a line-out jack or a speaker jack, and sometimes that can be routed to that same audio mixer or mixing board. And in this case, this pink one is for a microphone, like a headset. And the two black ones there are probably for surround sound, so they would be speaker outputs. One might be a bass speaker, one might be a mid-range, something like that. In vMix, we've got a whole list of inputs. That is, in fact, on this list right here, there's something called, well, it's not on the list because it's not plugged in, but it would be an input. If there was a cable plugged into this blue jack right there, it would show up on this list as a possible input. And so we might take it in vMix. And if we wanted to send it somewhere else, we would send it as an output. Now, a lot of times folks say, well, I need to make sure that my master output goes to the stream. The master output always goes to the stream, unless you get into the real deepness of vMix and adjust that. It always goes to the stream. The master is always recorded. But in this case, the master here, we have an option to send it out to a physical device in the room. Or let's just say, for the sake of the argument, a physical device in the room. A set of speakers somewhere so that we can hear what's going on. Same thing for the headphones. It's a device in the room. And then our 7 audio channels, audio outputs here, can send to other devices in the room or can send to other devices in vMix, or, yeah, you know, you can route audio out to NDI so that you can get it on an NDI. No, that would be somewhere else. Sorry, I forgot to say that. Forgot I shouldn't have said that. So that, my friends, that is the basics of audio. Audio inputs, audio outputs, mixing boards, auxiliary outputs, cables into vMix, vMix audio inputs, vMix audio outputs. I might have to redo this because this didn't turn out to make as much sense as I thought it would. Sometimes you have to teach something quite a few times in order to really hone it down and get all the terminology right, and the order of the order of the process, the order of the flow of the teaching assignment. Anyway, that's it. Yeah. Well, let's move to the post show. We'll see what you think I did well and what I didn't do well, and we'll right back with your questions. I don't know if you can hear in the background here. You probably can't, because I think my mic is probably blocking it. But we have a what would you call it? We have a running toilet that just runs because the landlord hasn't taken. It's taken them 3 weeks to continue to tell me no, they can't get somebody out here yet to fix it. So we won't go in there. So Is this a real screen or a for real? Is this a green screen or for real backdrop? Rich, you know, so many people were using backdrops that I thought I would do this as sort of satire on what a backdrop would look like if I did one. And it turns out it's really simple. And I don't have to worry too much about lighting. I light myself. I'm pretty well lit. And the vMix poster back there, it's lit by a very simple desktop lamp. And the rest of it is one of my workbenches. So yeah. So let's see. This is Greg answering the question about the microphone. Is it an input or an output? And of course, he's like both, which is true. Which is true. Ed, I feel your pain. Sometimes smaller is not better. Otis, yes. Glad you're here. Also from Texas, Michael Graves. And yeah, you know, Michael, I was intending to say that when I was talking about the auxiliary output. And I guess I did a little bit, but I didn't call it by name. But I remember when Mike Phillips was teaching me audio 12 and a half years ago. And it took me a month to understand what a mix minus was. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. Just couldn't get it. Well, that might simplify things some, but what he's talking about is audio over IP for the win. But for a lot of the folks that I'm talking to, they're in a pretty traditional environment where they have, a lot of them, just an old analog mixer and some microphones, and they're taking an output from vMix, most likely the main out, and bringing it into vMix and having problems. Or they're in a studio situation where they're taking a remote caller, and that remote caller might be from Zoom, might be a screen capture and an audio capture from Zoom, or might be using vMix Zoom internally, or a vMix call, or a vMix caller rather, or a Skype call that again is just a captured audio capture and video capture. And the simplest ones of those to solve is all of them where the guest is using speakers to hear, and that creates the feedback loop. So yeah. Yeah, and John is going to say, or the USB port, and a lot of folks are using USB. The thing with USB, where it gets a little complicated, is that a USB is a bidirectional audio device, or can be. So it's sending and receiving audio. It's acting both as an input and as an output. And so depending on the device you have, a mixer, an audio interface, whatever it might be, depends on how that works. And I wasn't prepared to get into that right now. And yes, and the problem with people like Michael Graves is they're brilliant, and and this is a primer. This is a basic, you don't know nothing, I want to explain something video. So the folks that would know enough about video over IP to even know what VoIP meant wouldn't need to know the difference between an input and an output because they grew up with it. Otis has his channels sent to the vMix to MixBus monitors, pulpit, stayed, brand, drum. There you go, and a separate vMix via a digital mixer, the Behringer X32. which can send its out. Otis, if you're still here, how are you doing your outputs? Are you doing them over an analog cable, XLR converted to 1/8 inch, or you taking a USB output? If you take a USB output from the X32, you can actually bring in each one of the X32 channels pre-fader and do your own mix in vMix. Just saying, because it's going to allow each channel to flow through the USB. If you're taking it over an XLR cable or a 1/4 inch cable, something like that, it's pre-mixed and you can't separate it out. All right, Otis says we're using the X Dante to DAW to vMix. Okay. So is the DAW sending it out? By USB? Analog? Sorry, Dave. I probably switched and forgot to switch. No worries, Gunner. You can run it back to the beginning even while we're doing it here. I'll do that with the vMix Fun Time live show if I forget and join them, 5 minutes into the show. Well, I want to see the pre-show. And if you don't watch the pre-show when it's live, you don't get the pre-show with the vMix Fun Time live show. So I'll run YouTube back to the beginning, and then I'll increase the speed to 2x, and they talk, kind of fast, but I can generally understand what they're saying, and that catches me up to real time. And then I can chat in real time. Exactly. It's just inputs and outputs. Ethernet. There we go. That's right. Of course, it's Dante. So it's the ultimate. It's not an analog cable like XLR or 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch. It's not USB, even though USB would be, how would you describe that? Digital, yeah. Or Dante, which is indeed digital. So yeah. Not doing Dante here, really don't have a need for it. There's not much going on here. And when I was doing the live stream at the church, we were simply taking an analog output out of the X32. Didn't do USB, would like to have done USB, but it was just so far between the sound booth, which was in the sanctuary, and the live streaming room, which is not in the sanctuary. So we really couldn't see or hear anything, live. We could just look at monitors and listen to headphones to see what was going on. And never took the time to improve that situation. Yes. When you know, you know. Let's see. Let me get some of these out of the way here. There we go. So audio. That's my comment. Just audio. What can I say? It's audio. I like that vMix Call is built-in mix minus. Before vMix Call came out and we were capturing Skype calls, we really had to rig up things to create a mix minus. I had a Behringer X, I think it was a 1202 or 1206 or something like that. Anyway, it was a 12 input mixer and had one maybe more than one, but one I remember, one auxiliary output. And it also had USB output. But we couldn't use the USB output because the Skype caller and my voice would come out over USB, and then my voice, anyway, it took me the longest time to figure out how to do mix minus because I didn't understand audio. Yes, and a ground loop, for those folks that don't know, is a hum that's forgot the words and is stuck in your audio path somewhere along the way. And everybody says, oh well, it's a ground loop because your devices are not all plugged into the same electrical outlet or on the same breaker, or and that may be true, but that doesn't always help you fix it. In my case at the church, we had a ground loop. The X32 was in the sanctuary, which is about 30 feet away, 40 feet away from the live streaming room. And so we had to get a ground loop isolator. Luckily, I had one in my black bag. And and so the audio comes out XLR, gets converted to RCA. No, I take that back. Yes, gets converted to RCA because the ground loop isolator I had was RCA only, left and right channels, the white and the red. And then the RCA jacks coming out of the ground loop went into a Behringer, what is it, a UC 200 or 202, something like that. The little device, it's about the size of an old small cassette audio tape, and had excuse me, had RCA in and then had USB out. And so that's how we were bringing the audio in, converting it to RCA, cleaning up the ground loop, and then converting it to digital to bring it into the PC. And it's been flawless for 8 years. Have not had a problem with that. But it is, and in this case, Michael's saying that a digital connection is nice for that. But in our case, we introduced it by coming out analog from the mixer. And that XLR cable went into the wall, because I ran it myself, up inside the wall, through the attic, down into a utility closet where the heating and air conditioning was located, around the heating and air conditioning, and then through a hole in the wall out to the production room. And who knows how many electrical cables it paralleled during that time. If you've got a cable that an audio cable running right next to an electrical cable that has juice going through it, it will give you a hum. And that may be what we had instead of a ground loop. Not really sure, but the ground loop isolator killed it. And it's from Radio Shack. I bought it from Radio Shack maybe 14 years ago, and used it when I did live sports, because we'd end up with all sorts of bad electrical setups and those press boxes and stuff. Yeah, that was fun. Sometimes I miss those times, but I don't miss lugging, 3 or 4 crates of gear up, 42 steps to a press box, setting it all up with the help of some kids. Then after the gig, knocking it all down, putting it back in a form that made sense in those boxes, and then carting all those boxes down, because all the kids had always evaporated by that point. Anyway, it was fun. Well, guys, we're going to wrap up for today. So audio for children and idiots. And there could be more on this subject coming up in the future. If you're tuning, if you want to tune in next week, we'll be here, and Toby Mills will be here with virtual video director. We talked about that. It was probably 4 or 5 weeks ago, and we were able to get him on the line. He may be a few minutes late because he's got to drop his kids off at school. He's in New Zealand, which is probably 7 hours. How many hours would that be ahead of us? 17 hours ahead of us, something like that. So we'll be there on Wednesday. He'll be dropping his kids off at school on Thursday. How about that? Craziness. Well, I appreciate you guys today, and thanks for tuning in. And we will catch you next week with virtual video director. Thanks for watching.